I'm Alex with Storyline Travel, and today we're going to talk about traveling the world. Walt Disney World, that is. Stay tuned. In this video, we'll cover part 1, buses, watercraft, and on-foot transportation. You're ready to go to Disney World and you've checked into your resort? Great. Now, how do I get to the parks? What about Disney Springs? What's the best way to get around? That's what we're going to talk about today. First of all, let's talk about buses. Buses are probably the first and best option to get around because they are everywhere. All the resorts have bus stops, but something to be aware of is not all resorts have buses that go to every park in Disney Springs. Sometimes when there's an alternative, you'll be asked to take that. We'll talk about some of that going forward. But one thing you can guarantee is that all resorts will have a bus stop. From the resort, the buses will typically service 5 areas. The 4 theme parks, Animal Kingdom, Hollywood Studios, Epcot, and Magic Kingdom, and Disney Springs. Now, with Disney Springs and with Animal Kingdom, you'll also have the option of going to the 2 water parks that are on property when they're up and running. One thing to note is that from Disney Springs, you'll only have access to go back to a resort. They do not service the parks themselves. It's a good thing to note if you find yourself at Disney Springs and you have a dining reservation at Epcot that you're going to have to go to a resort, then catch a transportation over to Epcot. One of the tips we have is go to a resort where you can walk to a theme park. For example, if I want to go from Disney Springs and go have dinner over at Epcot, I might catch a bus to the boardwalk, walk through their resort area to the boardwalk area, and then a few steps, okay, maybe a little more than a few steps, over a bridge, and you're at the International Gateway, which is also considered the back door to Epcot. There are no resort-to-resort bus routes. Another good thing to know. Disney's recommendation, if you're going from a resort to a resort, is to go through Disney Springs. There are a few other ways to get around some of that. For example, if you want to go to the Contemporary, you might be better off going to Magic Kingdom and then catching the monorail or walking to the Contemporary. So just understand that there are no resort-to-resort routes, and that becomes real important for things like dining reservations, or if you have a stay where you're going from one resort to another resort in the middle of your vacation. Let's talk about boarding a bus. This seems to sometimes catch people a bit off guard. When a bus is boarding, if there is a ECV or a wheelchair, those will be boarded first. And so no matter when they come in, when they show up, what the line looks like, they typically will take 1 to 2, depends on the bus and their configuration. It also depends on if they've been at another bus stop and a resort where they've picked up anyone. They'll load those first. And then next, usually a family member, sometimes the whole family, that is traveling with the person in the ECV or wheelchair will be boarded. That will be boarded from the back door of the bus. Once on board and they're going to board the line, everyone else will board through the front of the bus. So you'll line up as soon as the bus comes, and until capacity is reached, you'll go through that. As I record this in 2021, there is currently spacing done based on the parties. There's partitions between different seats, and the bus driver will board according to the group or family size where he has or she has space within the bus. And standing is frowned upon to allow for social distancing. So now let's talk about, you get to your spot, how are we going to leave? Get off the bus. So Both front and back doors will be opened and can be used. And it's, anyone who's seated will leave the bus first, and then wheelchairs and ECVs are taken off last. One other thing to note, if you take a stroller with you, they must be folded up before you get on the bus. Hopefully empty, but yeah, strollers must be folded up once you get on the bus. So if you have a sleeping child in a stroller, you will have to take them out, fold up your stroller, and get on. And that's the buses. So the next part of transportation I'd like to talk to you about is watercraft. One of the first experiences I had with watercraft was going to the Magic Kingdom. So if you drive to the Magic Kingdom and you'll park at an area called the TTC, or Ticket and Transportation Center. Between the TTC and Magic Kingdom is a lake. And so one of the ways to get to Magic Kingdom from the parking lot from the TTC is to take a ferry. Ferry runs every 5 to 10 minutes, so there's constantly a ferry in motion going back and forth. You can roll right on if you have a wheelchair ECV, a stroller's fine, and you walk on to go. Also in the Magic Kingdom area, there are water taxis from several resorts. If you're staying at the Wilderness Lodge or Fort Wilderness Campground and Cabins, they provide a water taxi. The Contemporary Resort and Bay Lake Tower has a stop for a water taxi, and so does the Grand Floridian. If you're staying at the Polynesian, you can either walk to the TTC and catch the ferry, or you can walk to the Grand Floridian and catch the water taxi if you want to take a watercraft to Magic Kingdom. For Epcot and Hollywood Studios, their Friendship boats, also water taxis, will go between Epcot Boardwalk, the Yacht and Beach Club, and then the Swan and Dolphin resorts. And those boats go back and forth between Hollywood Studios and Epcot all day with 3 stops along the way. Again, Swan and Dolphin is a stop, Yacht and Beach Club is a stop, and then the Boardwalk is a stop. And finally, for Disney Springs, you have the resorts that provide water taxis to Disney Springs. It's Old Key West, Saratoga Springs, and the tree houses at Saratoga Springs. And then finally, Port Orleans has a water taxi service to Disney Springs. And so those are your water routes if you want to go. A few things to note. If you have a wheelchair ECV, they do provide roll-on service. Typically, you're just in line with everyone else. Now, there may be different stops where they will have a handicap identified area or a place with a wheelchair painted for you to sit there, so that the captains will know if they need to provide for that. They do put a ramp between the ferry or the water taxi and the dock for you to go on. For strollers, once again, those are folded up. Again, empty, please, are folded up while you're on water transport. Also to note on the water transport is it is subject to weather conditions. There are definitely times when they will not be running based on what's going on around you. Rough waves, a storm come in. Just be aware that option may not be there, depending on what's going on in the weather. Great. On a side note, there's actually several resort to park areas where you can walk. From the Contemporary, it is really just a short walk to the Magic Kingdom from that resort area. And recently completed in the Magic Kingdom area is a path from the Grand Floridian around to Magic Kingdom. And that opens up not just the Grand Floridian, but if you really want a good walk, if you're at the Polynesian, you can walk pathways to the Grand Floridian and then around to Magic Kingdom. If you're in the Epcot resort area, Yacht and Beach Club, Swan and Dolphin, and the Boardwalk all provide a path to walk to Epcot, and they're actually pretty close to Epcot, to be honest. But you also have a walking path to Hollywood Studios. And for that note, if you are at Hollywood Studios and want to go to Epcot, you may find a nice stroll between those two parks to be the right way to get you from one park to the other. Finally, if you're on foot, Saratoga Springs has a path and a bridge that will take you from that resort over to Disney Springs. And there's actually a handful of good neighbor hotels that provide walking paths to Disney Springs, and a few that you can do a walkover of the roads that are around there. So if you're at maybe the Hilton or some of the Hilton's, Marriott's close by to Disney Springs, you may be able to just walk over to Disney Springs instead of take a vehicle. I hope you found this useful information. If you did, please give it a like and share it with someone that you think could find value in this. We come out with a new video every week, so press subscribe. And turn on that notification, because as soon as it comes out on Friday, you'll get the heads up that, hey, we have a new video out. I hope you enjoyed our video. At Storyline Travel, every adventure is a story waiting to be told. Check back next week where we talk about the monorail, Skyliner, and using a car at Walt Disney World.